I'm going to start a recording now. All right, well, welcome again, everyone. I'll ask one of the people who's been here for a while to please repost our link in the chat to our sign-in sheet. So today we're enthused to introduce to you some initiatives that we're hoping to partner with the community to do in high-performance computing. And we're doing this with a multi-session launch today in various time zones. We're really grateful that you're here in our session where Hatem Ltaief will kick us off by providing a brief introduction to some work that he's been doing in addressing computational challenges in giant optical telescope control. Very exciting. And then after he speaks, we'll move into a phase where we will work on launching our initiatives and telling you about those. So we're really going to have a two-part session today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Hatem. So not only is he the vice chair of our SIAM activity group on supercomputing, he's also principal research scientist at the Extreme Computing Research Center at KAUST. And he has been a longtime leader in our community for advancing computer science numerics as applied to high-performance scientific applications. So we're really looking forward to hear what he has to share with us today.
Great, thank you. Can you guys hear me? All right.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Lois, for the nice introduction. So I'm gonna talk for about 10 minutes, I hope not more than that, on some of the work we've been conducting with astronomers and how we are able to meet their computational challenges of those giant optical telescopes, in particular in the work related to real-time control. Before that, I'd like to acknowledge my team. It's a job, it's a work by with my colleague Yushi Yong and David Keys from the Extreme Computing Center at KAUST, Damien Gratadour, an astronomer from Paris Observatory, Jesse Craney, a research scientist from the Research School of Astronomy and Astrophysics in the Australian National University. But there is a whole team behind really this work, spanning vendors to astronomers to HPC experts, a runtime expert that are involved in this work. So we've been supporting several major ground-based telescopes for almost a decade now. It's got darker, just one second. All right, light is back. We're saving energy here in Saudi Arabia. So we've been supporting several major ground-based telescopes. We started a decade ago with the European Extremely Large Telescope with Damien Gratadour. This is a telescope which cost over €1 billion, and it's a European consortium behind it. We work mostly in the design of some of the instruments and how we can operate those instruments close to real time. A few years afterwards, we worked with the Subaru telescope. This is a Japanese telescope located in Hawaii with Olivier Guillon. And this is actually a telescope which is already up and running. There is already an instrument there called XEXAO. And this is an instrument that looks into exoplanet. And yet again, there we integrate some of the work we do to facilitate and accelerate the real-time processing required with that instrument. Actually, during COVID, so a couple of years ago, we also started working with the Very Large Telescope. It's already also an up and running telescope, mostly led by the European countries. And there we, yet again, provided some of our expertise in linear algebra and trying to optimize their workload so that we are close to real time. So they all have a real time constraint, right? So if I go to the next slide, each of those telescopes have their own instrument that is already deployed, for the Subaru and the Very Large Telescope, and some other instruments are still in processing, in design, if you will, and we are already providing some estimates in terms of real-time processing. So the one of interest for this talk is the MAVIS instrument. So this is to be deployed in the Very Large Telescope. And we are really excited to provide some of our expertise and to accelerate such workload. So what is the problem with those telescopes located on the ground, right, on Earth? Is the atmospheric turbulence. This is the main challenge, is actually a nightmare for astronomers because of the atmospheric turbulence. The light that comes in from remote stars reduce the astronomical images quality, and the light get distorted as soon as it reaches the camera, which operate behind the telescope. And this is really a problem because they are not then able to look into remote stars and understand from the light, its composition, whether there is some sort of life in it. And this is really a challenge. To cope with that challenge, adaptive optics come to the rescue for those giant telescopes. So this is a cartoon showing how adaptive optics works in a nutshell. So the light comes into the main diameter of the telescope, the main mirror of the telescope. Behind it, there are some tiny deformable mirror. Here we only show one, but there are actually thousands of those. And when the light comes in and gets reflected, there is some wavefront cameras, wavefront sensors camera that detect the turbulence, that detect the level of turbulence that the light has had to go through. And then from that, we take that information, that turbulence, and integrate it into a simulation, a workflow that has to be done in real time to compensate for it. And the compensation happens with tilting those deformable mirror, right? And this is basically the workflow. The light comes in, it's distorted, we need to restore it as if there were no turbulence. And the process to do that, this is where we contribute our work. This is another cartoon showing how those tiny actuators operate and tilt those mirror. And those are basically the, this is the outcome that we are providing out of this workflow to tell in real time how we should message here, it's a deeper and sharper than any space-based instrument. So it's even higher quality. It's able to really capture a lot of lights that are not able to be captured if you were even to run on, the Hubble telescope, for instance, in space. So it's very interesting for us. We got really challenged by our astronomers from ANU. But really what this boils down to for all of the ground-based telescopes, it's a matrix vector multiplication. That's really what drives the simulation in real time. That's the main operation that account for most of the time to solution for this workflow. And what we see here, it's a matrix. It's a rectangular matrix. The number of row is the number of actuator, meaning the number of mirror. And the number of column, this is the measurement coming from the wavefront sensors camera. So it's a rectangular matrices. And what, when you do sort of an X-ray on this matrix, you reveal, how much, the data that is significant and the data that perhaps is not that significant, meaning the matrix itself, has internally, information that is relevant and information that perhaps is not that relevant because of, for instance, redundancy, right? So it has some data sparsity structure that we try to leverage in this work here. So we compress, if you will, those matrices by looking at their small tiles, fine-grained tiles, and capture the most significant information on, on each of those tiles before we do our matrix vector multiplication. So how do we do it? We have a dense matrix. This is how we start with. We multiply by a vector, and this Y vector here, that's the vector which tells how those actuator needs to pull or push those tiny mirror to compensate for the turbulence. So what we do, this is a dense matrix. We compress it, as I said, each of those tiles, and we may keep the most significant information. We create those U bases and V bases representation. This is a new data representation of the matrix, and then we have to operate on it. So not only we cut in terms of memory footprint, but we also save in terms of arithmetic complexity. We operate, then we do our matrix vector multiplication. It has 3 phases. This is the first phase where we take care of the U bases, and eventually we get prepared to take care of the U bases here for the final operation. And all those phases are based on matrix vector multiplication in batch mode. So tiny, small matrix vector multiplication launched in a batch mode. Okay. So that's the main take-home message here. We translate the big GEMV matrix vector multiplication into much smaller one, and we run them concurrently in batches. Where do we run those? Right, we run those on various architecture. Those are all standalone systems, shared memory, possibly with GPUs from traditional vendors, Intel, AMD, Fujitsu, NVIDIA, and NEC. So we use for the x86 MPI plus OpenMP programming model. For ARM, we also use MPI plus OpenMP. It is true it's shared memory, but we use MPI for doing the right pinning of our threads on those architecture. We run also on accelerators using ROCm and CUDA, programming language for those for AMD and NVIDIA respectively. We run also on NEC, this vector architecture, and we use MPI there plus OpenMP. If you were to look at another way for those architecture, you could categorize them in HBM, and then this would span from AMD, Fujitsu, NVIDIA, and NEC. And the last but not least, this EPIC-ROM has actually a nice feature with a high cache capacity for L3 that gives a possibility of leveraging the hardware opportunity here of basically maximizing the bandwidth of the cache, level 3 cache. And that's what we do here. And because we compress the data, right? We make the data small enough that it does fit into a EPIC-ROM, for instance, we are able to score high bandwidth up to more than 1.4 terabyte per second, which gets even better than HBM technology or GPU hardware accelerator. So it's quite significant to be able to get that bandwidth, because we do fit in L3, and that happened because of an algorithmic optimization. In terms of time to solution, so the lower the better, and indeed EPIC-ROM scores the best time to solution, but you can see that NEC, Aurora, and A64FX are also not that far from what we score in EPIC-ROM. As a conclusion, we've been able to accelerate significantly the real-time processing of this ground-based astronomy application, thanks to this tile-rank matrix vector multiplication. There are future work to be done in terms of exploiting perhaps mixed precision, in addition to algebraic compression, as I did here. Also, there are the possibility of using advanced compression algorithm. But turns out this kernel is actually used in at least 2 other applications, including seismic imaging. And this is something that we are trying closely to improve. With that, I'd like to thank you.
Thank you so much, Hatem, for that incredibly interesting talk. We have time for a few questions. I invite the audience, if you would like to ask a question, please either raise your hand or type your question in the chat, and we can call on you. Yes, Bora.
Hey, Bora.
Hi. Thank you, Hatem. It's very interesting. So as far as I understood, you are running an SVD beforehand to low rank to approximate the matrix. Does that happen offline, or it is part of the process?
Very good. It actually should happen online, right? But the good thing is that matrix it gets reused for several iteration during the observation night. So typically for a window of 10 minutes, the matrix does not change, right? So we can pay the price of doing the compression, which is quite expensive. I mean, if you use SVD like optimal algorithm for that. There are other approach, if you want to improve this, but we know it's embarrassingly parallel, and there is, I would say, quite good implementation, decent implementation for it on GPUs or even on CPU, and we have not seen it as a bottleneck at this time. But the more we give to astronomers, the more the challenges. So they always come back with even more larger problem sizes, larger dimensions, or system configuration. And indeed, that not offline, but that compression phase may become a bottleneck.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hatem. I don't see any other questions, so we can move on
Sure.
to the next phase of our session. All right, so here's a fun part for audience participation. You should see a poll appearing on your screen. We're just curious where everyone is today. We know we're reaching out around the world, and please let us know where you are. And while you're responding, I will get back in here with sharing my screen. We're hoping to get lots of responses to the location question. Okay. So it looks like we have most people who've responded. So I'm going to just share the results so we can see where our audience is. You should have popping up on your screen information that shows that we have a mixture of people, mainly from Europe and North America. No surprise given the time zone, but a few hardy people even in other time zones who are joining us. So thanks so much for being here. Okay, now we're going to launch into introducing our initiatives. For those of you who just joined us, just a reminder that we're doing this introductory session 3 times today in various time zones. So we're recording these sessions. So if you're interested in the lightning talks by the speakers, eventually we'll be posting those online. So there'll be opportunities to see them. So one thing that's motivating our work in the activity group to engage with all of you as part of the community to grow and help our area of work in high performance computing thrive is a look at what recent areas are popular from among recent PhD graduates in the United States. So you can see here that scientific and numerical computing and high performance computing are on the list, but they're not at the top of the list now. But another way to also look at that is to recognize that high performance computing really has begun to pervade nearly everything that's going on. So there's reasons to be enthusiastic and optimistic, but also opportunities to help grow our community. So because of that, the current officers of the SIAM activity group have decided to launch a few initiatives, and we're hoping that you are interested in partnering with us. So first of all, Hatem, who's our vice chair, has really been doing a fantastic job at spearheading our outreach effort through Twitter. We established a new account and have begun to use this as a way to reach out to our community, especially to early career people who tend to use this as a mode of communication. So we certainly welcome any of you who happen to be interested in helping spread the word to please join us. You might want to follow us on Twitter. Our handle is listed here on this slide. Let's see, so we have another poll. Let's see. Well, I have a poll for Twitter County users, but I don't seem to be able to launch it while I am sharing my screen. I don't quite understand that, but we'll just ask you to, in your own mind, think about whether you might be interested in helping us spread the word. Our second complementary initiative focuses on inclusivity. And by this, we consider a couple of different angles. We're wanting, of course, to increase the emphasis on high performance computing throughout the world. We're promoting the use of the existing hashtag HPC4All as a way to help raise awareness of resources and other information that may be useful to the community at large. And we as an activity group will be planning to create a space to help centralize some of this information. We're also looking for the community to help share information and best practices on approaches for effective engagement of underrepresented groups in high performance computing. This bit.ly link here, which is accessible through a hyperlink on the sign-in sheet that you've already signed in on is available for anyone who's interested in helping us plan these initiatives and getting involved with them. We encourage you to sign up on this interest sheet. The interest sheet is distinct and separate from the attendance sheet for today. As part of our Inclusivity initiative, as I said, we've started to begin brainstorming about collecting information about resources that are available for newcomers to begin gaining exposure to using extreme scale computing resources, as well as learning about some of the fundamentals and as well as considering best practices. So in a few minutes after we progress through the other initiatives, we'll open up some discussion, and we certainly welcome your input we know you all have lots of great experience and ideas. So we're looking for feedback and suggestions from everyone who's attending. We are planning to launch a complimentary web space to provide this material. As I'm sure you know, SIAM provides a lovely web environment for SIAM as a whole, with a distinct space for each activity group, but we as activity group members do not have the ability to augment that space. So we're going to be establishing a place where we can put some of this additional information. And we're looking for people who might be interested in helping us to think carefully through requirements, design, and development of this site, as well as providing updates and content and reaching out to the community to help ensure that our new site is thriving and sustainable. So anyone who might be interested in that, we'd love to hear from you, especially people who have interest in web design and development. None of our current offices really are experts in that, so we really do need help on that front. And we are going to be launching a webinar series, which is intended to provide accessible information about all the exciting things that our community is doing in high performance computing. And our intention is to aim this material at people who are not already experts in high performance computing, so very much beginners, undergraduate students, possibly even high school students, to help showcase how exciting this field is and how impactful and fun it might be for early career people to consider this as a field. So our intention is to reach out to engage a wide variety of speakers across industry, academia, and national labs throughout the entire world. And if you're interested in helping us plan this series, we also encourage you to sign up on our interest list. So we're looking for people who might be wanting to suggest topics that you believe would be of broad interest to a wide range of people, as well as people who might want to suggest speakers. We're also looking to, as part of this, help teach ourselves, especially early career people, how to communicate effectively for non-experts. We recognize that many of us in our academic work are trained to communicate in very precise details about facts that are so important to us and our colleagues who are our peers and our experts, but are not necessarily easily understood by the broader community. So some of you who might have ideas and suggestions for resources that could help us teach ourselves in our community how to communicate effectively for non-experts, we'd certainly welcome input there. We're excited to announce that our first seminar speaker has been lined up. I'm sure you all know Professor Satoshi Matsuoka. We are expecting that he'll be speaking sometime this summer, and we'll be back in touch with when that session will take place. As you know, he's been a leader in the community for many, many years, and in particular now is overseeing the development of the Fugaku supercomputer in Japan. So now we'll pivot into the fun part of our session, which is our interactive discussion part. So again, we're interested in your ideas, initiatives, and also we're looking for ideas for communicating through other venues such as SIAM News. As I'm sure you all probably know, there's opportunity for each activity group to contribute material to SIAM News, and we'd like to make sure that our supercomputing area, high performance computing, is well represented. So for any of you who have suggestions for topics, suggestions for people, or even some of you who might be interested in being more on the front lines of trying to help recruit and curate topics over the long term. We would certainly welcome your help with that. And if you're interested in that, again, please indicate this on our interest list sign-up sheet. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen. And I will open the floor for discussion. Our plan is to just chat informally, taking notes in our sign-up sheet. You can see there's a space for notes at the bottom. So Hatem and I will be jointly leading this part of the session. But before we launch into this discussion, I realized I forgot to mention that a special part of our activity here today is to celebrate all of you who've chosen to attend, and we'll be giving away one t-shirt, a SIAM supercomputing t-shirt to a lucky attendee. So we encourage you to hang in here and chat with us, and we'll see who is the lucky t-shirt winner.
It's a limited edition t-shirt, so it's not any type of t-shirt, right?
So I'm going to stop recording now, and then we'll move to our discussion phase.